My name is Melissa. I was in my second year of college when I decided to go on spring break with my roommate Vanessa. We were both exhausted from courses and exams, and desperately needed to unplug. Unlike the majority of students on our campus who were heading to Cancun or Miami, we had a limited budget. After checking various options, we found an incredible offer for a motel a few blocks from the beach in Santa Cruz, California. It wasn't luxurious, but it was perfect for us, inexpensive, close to the ocean, and far from our professors. The first 2 days were simply fantastic. We spent the mornings at the beach, the afternoons exploring the famous boardwalk with its vintage rides, and the evenings trying different local restaurants and bars. Neither of us was a big drinker, but we allowed ourselves a few cocktails to get into the holiday spirit. We were finally experiencing the American spring break that we had always seen in movies, albeit in a quieter version and with much less money. On the third evening, we decided to attend a beach party organized by some guys we had met the day before. It was a fairly small gathering, about 30 people around a bonfire on the beach with music, snacks, and drinks. I was having fun, but I noticed that Vanessa seemed particularly interested in one of the guys, Tyler. The two of them walked away for a stroll along the shore, and I didn't see them for at least an hour. I was chatting with some students from San Diego when I received a message from an unknown number. Fun party, right? I looked around confused. I hadn't given my number to anyone there. I replied asking who it was, but got no response. I thought it was a prank and went back to socializing, but a feeling of unease began to creep in. An hour later, Vanessa still hadn't returned. I sent her a message asking if she was okay. No response. It wasn't like her to ignore messages, especially when we were in a new place. I started to worry when I received another message from the unknown number. Your friend is having a great time. Maybe too great. That froze the blood in my veins. I asked one of the party organizers where Tyler and Vanessa might have gone, but no one had seen them. I was about to call Vanessa when I received a photo from the same unknown number. It was a blurry image of a girl lying on the sand. It looked like Vanessa, but it was too dark to be certain. Below, a message: I think she drank too much. Panic overtook me. I showed the message to some guys at the party, but most of them were too interested in having fun to take me seriously. Only one girl, Amber, understood the gravity of the situation and offered to help me search along the beach. After 20 minutes of fruitless searching, I received another message: further north. Near the rocks. With Amber by my side, we ran in that direction. The beach was completely deserted at that point, and the moon barely illuminated the landscape. Then we heard a moan. Vanessa was there, sitting with her back against a rock, semi-conscious. I noticed Tyler quickly walking away toward the main road. Amber helped me take Vanessa to the hospital, where doctors confirmed that she had been given a suspicious substance that had caused confusion and loss of consciousness. Fortunately, we had found her in time, before something worse could happen to her. While we waited at the hospital, I told everything to a police officer. He showed little interest, suggesting that Vanessa had probably just overdone it with alcohol, a common occurrence during spring break. His indifference infuriated me, but I was too tired to argue. We returned to the motel at dawn, with Vanessa still dazed but conscious. We decided that we would leave that very day, but we needed to rest for a few hours before packing. I double-locked the door of the room and collapsed exhausted onto the bed. I woke up with a start at 11 when my phone rang. It was a message from the same number: I'm sorry the evening ended like that. I'll be waiting for you for a drink at the seaside bar tonight. Immediately followed by another: I have the keys to your room 118. You shouldn't leave them in the lock while you sleep." I rushed to check the door. The key was gone. I woke Vanessa up and immediately called the front desk, which sent a maintenance worker to change the lock. Meanwhile, I received another message: "I took some nice photos while you were sleeping." This time I went directly to the city's main police station, not the tourist office where we had been the night before. I showed all the messages and explained what had happened. An older detective finally took the case seriously, especially when he discovered that Tyler Roberts had a history of intimidating behavior and harassment. The police located Tyler in the early afternoon. In his apartment, they found several stolen motel keys and, more disturbingly, an album of photos of girls who were asleep or unconscious. Apparently, he had been operating like this for years during spring break. He would identify lone or vulnerable tourists, drug them, and then photograph them or worse. We spent the rest of our vacation giving statements to the police and constantly changing motel rooms for safety. We discovered that Tyler wasn't acting alone. His roommate, who worked as a part-time receptionist at our motel, was an accomplice and had provided the room keys. During the flight back, Vanessa and I remained silent for most of the time. We both felt violated, even though we had managed to avoid the worst. What was supposed to be a carefree week had turned into a nightmare. The spring break that everyone described as the most fun time of college life had been a traumatic experience for us. A week after returning, while I was in the library studying, I received a notification on Instagram. Someone with a private profile and no photos had started following me. The username was Santa Cruz Memories. With trembling hands, I blocked the profile and immediately closed the app. Some spring break memories are best left behind forever, but the persistent feeling of vulnerability that experience left me with, I fear, will stay with me much longer than I ever imagined. I'll confess, my oldest son is in his final year of college. He's a brilliant kid, always responsible. I'm a bit worried about him right now because he decided to spend spring break on a camping trip in Canyonlands National Park in Utah, instead of coming home as he usually does. It caught me off guard when he told me, but I try to respect his choices. His mother has been dealing with health problems lately, and it would have meant a lot to her to have him here, but I suppose he prefers the adventure with his friends from the Campus Environmental Association. I can't blame him. I was exactly the same at his age, and I see a lot of myself in him. This situation reminded me of something I hadn't thought about in years, a story I'm about to tell. Curiously, it was my son who suggested I write down my experiences, so perhaps one day he'll read this account. I graduated from Berkeley, class of '97. I was a geology enthusiast and spent every free moment exploring national parks. It was a different era. We were all idealists, wanting to change the world through science and conservation. In my third year, I did something impulsive. I was dating a Mexican girl named Sofia Sanchez, whom I remember fondly. Sometimes I wonder how different my life would have been if I had chosen to continue that relationship. Instead of going home for spring break as usual, Sofia convinced me to go with her to Moab, Utah, near Canyonlands, where her family had a small isolated property. It was my first time in that desert region, and I was anxious to make a good impression, so I accepted without hesitation, but I was nervous. I didn't want to make mistakes, and Sofia had often talked about how close-knit her family was, so I was aware they already knew a lot about me. Fortunately, my anxiety proved unfounded, as I immediately integrated with everyone, and they seemed to appreciate me. Most of the vacation involved helping her family with some work on the property, but we had time for some excursions of our own. It was spring break, after all. One of these was a hike through a remote area of Canyonlands, a place rarely visited by tourists. Interesting little detail, Canyonlands is one of the least visited national parks in the United States, despite its breathtaking beauty. Sophia's uncle drove us to the beginning of a trail and left us there. We were both adventurous, so we certainly took advantage of the moment of freedom. The plan was to hike, enjoy the landscape, and photograph rare geological formations. We had prepared everything, it looked perfect, but we quickly discovered a problem. The trail we wanted to take was closed. I don't remember exactly why, perhaps landslides, maintenance, something like that, but I remember Sophia was really disappointed. I tried to calm her by suggesting other trails, but she was adamant. That particular route would offer views of unique geological formations that couldn't be seen elsewhere. It seemed like an exaggeration, but she had carefully studied the maps and was determined. She asked what I thought about ignoring the barriers and proceeding anyway. I had always been respectful of rules, but something that day, perhaps the excitement, made me agree. We made sure no one was around, crossed the barriers, and began walking on the forbidden trail. At first, it was exactly what we hoped for, even better. It seemed like we had the entire canyon to ourselves, which was particularly extraordinary considering how crowded it would have been under normal conditions. Imagine visiting a place of primordial beauty and being the only human present. An exclusivity impossible to find. We walked for hours, admiring the geological layers and taking photographs, enjoying the absolute solitude. It was really fantastic, I must admit. But then out of nowhere, Sophia stopped and grabbed my arm, almost making me fall. This immediately put me on alert, although I didn't understand what had frightened her. I looked frantically around until I saw it. A little further down the trail was what appeared to be a coyote dead in an unnatural way. Its body was twisted in an impossible position. Yes, it was large, and it seemed that its legs had been bent and interwoven in a deliberate pattern. I told Sophia to stay put, and I cautiously approached alone, hoping it was just an illusion created by branches or debris. It wasn't. I examined the body without getting too close and confirmed what I feared. The coyote had been manipulated and intentionally positioned. There were no obvious signs of wounds, but the position was too precise to be natural, which was definitely disturbing. The worst part, however, was that the body hadn't yet begun to decompose, which meant it had been placed there recently. Sophia was trembling. I was mostly shocked. I tried to reassure her by saying it was probably the work of some disturbed hiker who had found the animal already dead, although I couldn't fully explain it to myself. I put an arm around her shoulders and guided her past the body, trying to divert her attention. All I could think about was putting distance between us and that disturbing discovery. We walked in silence for a while, and even though we moved away from the coyote, it was clear that the magical moment had vanished. The adrenaline had erased my enthusiasm and tranquility. As disturbed as I felt, though, I could see that Sophia was significantly more shaken, and she no longer seemed to be enjoying the hike at all. She said she wanted to complete the trail as planned, but it was obvious she just wanted to get out of that canyon, and I couldn't blame her. As we walked, I couldn't help wondering what we had stumbled upon. It didn't make sense. I wasn't aware of local rituals or practices, but I couldn't imagine someone would do something like this for hunting or scientific purposes, yet I couldn't find another explanation. Perhaps it was the work of someone who had taken advantage of the isolation of the closed trail as we had. I really didn't know. Sophia and I walked for another mile or so while I tried to lift her spirits, but nothing worked. Finally, she admitted she felt uncomfortable and wanted to turn back. I didn't argue, although I certainly feared having to pass that spot again, mainly because I wasn't sure how it would affect her, and I just wanted her to feel safe. We retraced our steps, and I could sense we were approaching the point where we had seen the coyote. I told Sophia to keep her gaze toward the opposite side of the trail, and she did. I prepared myself as we rounded the final curve, but when the spot came into view, the coyote was no longer there. Someone had moved it. My heart began to race, and I instantly started scanning the surrounding rocks, terrified that someone was hiding among them. I wasn't prepared for what I saw next. Instead of a person, I noticed something in a small alcove in the rock wall. It was a small improvised altar. There were stones arranged in a circle, and in the center was what looked like an old children's toy stained with a reddish liquid. Next to it were faded photographs, so old and damaged that it was impossible to distinguish what they depicted. I couldn't help but gasp when I saw it, which made Sophia look up. As soon as she saw it, she let out a choked moan. Before she could say anything else, I grabbed her wrist and told her to run. We launched ourselves at full speed along the trail, trying not to trip on the rocks. I let her go ahead of me, and I continued to look over my shoulder, expecting someone to be following us. Instead, a distant sound echoed from somewhere behind us. It was a child's laughter, and it was completely out of place in that desert canyon. I felt Sophia start and almost trip, and for a second I thought she was going to fall. She let out a sob of panic and tried to run even faster, but she was already out of breath. I kept my grip on her wrist, practically dragging her as she slowed down. We couldn't stop, my own chest was burning, but we had to keep moving. Finally, Sophia could barely run anymore, so we had to slow down to a fast walk. I turned completely around and began walking backward, keeping my eyes fixed on the trail behind us. I was preparing for any eventuality. Someone had created that altar, something had caused that laughter. I was 100% sure I would see someone appear at any moment, but nothing happened. The beginning of the trail finally came into view, and for a brief moment, I thought we were safe, but then I saw someone standing near the barriers watching us. It was a park ranger with a stern expression. As soon as we crossed the barriers, he began to reprimand us for breaking the rules and told us he would have to report us. But then he looked carefully at Sophia, who at that point was both panicking and physically exhausted. I told the ranger everything, without omitting a single detail. He took it very seriously. He told us we both had to follow him. So we did. We were taken to a small forest ranger station where a supervisor was waiting. I had to repeat the story several times, especially when they called the police. Sophia didn't say a word. Finally, Sophia's uncle arrived, and we left, still shaken. I never knew what the authorities found or if they thoroughly investigated. I'm sure Sophia's family might have heard something, but we broke up the following summer, and we lost touch after graduation, so I really don't know what happened. I haven't thought about this experience for a long time, but it's still as disturbing as it was 25 years ago. I think the worst part of the whole incident was that child's laughter, because we never saw anyone else on that trail, and the nearest park to the area was over 15 miles away. All these years, I've always wondered if that old property of Sophia's family might have some connection to what we found that day in the canyon, but I've never had the courage to investigate. I'd consider myself a pretty rational guy. I'd say the same about most of my friends. This happened last year, so I'll get straight to the point. Spring break was supposed to be just me and my friends, Sawyer, Brielle, and Dakota, camping on a secluded beach in Florida. No crowds, just stars and waves. We arrived late, later than we had planned. We parked in the nearest lot and started walking toward the beach. The place was completely silent, no other campers, no fishermen, nothing but empty sand stretching for miles, according to Brielle, who knew the area. Locals sometimes used that part of the beach for night fishing, but that night it was empty. It wasn't completely dark yet, but the sun had started to set, so we needed to set up camp quickly. Sawyer and I began pitching the tents. Since I had driven, I'd brought my dog, Maverick. He was a German shepherd who loved the sand, so we all had fun watching him run around and roll. At one point, Dakota pointed out a pickup truck in the distance, saying it had already passed by twice. I turned and saw an old, beat-up Dodge Ram driving slowly on the narrow access road that ran parallel to the dunes. The access road was little more than a strip of packed sand, just wide enough for a vehicle. On one side was the beach where we were, and on the other side was a row of palm trees and coastal vegetation. You couldn't see the main roads from where we were. The pickup passed by and eventually disappeared down the road. The four of us forgot about it and went back to setting up, and when we finished, we decided to crack open some beers and chat in a circle. The girls were drinking seltzer instead of beer, which we teased them about. It was almost completely dark by that point. I don't remember who noticed it first, but that pickup that had passed by had returned again, only this time it stopped when it was parallel to us. The driver's door opened and a man got out. I could tell it was a man because he was very tall, though I couldn't make out any features of his face in the darkness. He started walking toward us, and the girls got nervous. Sawyer and I told them not to worry, and we stood up to intercept the man before he could reach our campsite. Maverick was already on high alert, so I told him to come with us. As we approached, I started to notice the man was walking strangely. There was this slight wobble in his step, and he nearly stumbled a few times when we got close enough. Sawyer asked, "Everything all right?" Trying to keep the tone light. The guy didn't waste any time. He immediately said we were in his private fishing area. He slurred his words a bit, and I figured he was a little drunk. I told him we thought the beach was public land. Keep in mind it was really unlikely some guy had exclusive rights to the beach. There weren't any no trespassing signs. Anyway. After I said this, the guy didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out a knife from his back pocket. Maverick started growling in response to the man's body language, which honestly should have scared the guy, given how intimidating German shepherds can look. But he didn't budge. Instead, he started running toward us with the knife pointed. Maverick charged at him and jumped to attack the arm holding the knife, bringing him to the ground. I shouted for Maverick to stop, since I didn't want my dog getting hurt, but Maverick managed to make the guy drop the knife. The man screamed in pain as Maverick bit his arm. I whistled for him to back off, and he listened. He ran back to my side, but kept his eyes on the guy who was now writhing in pain on the sand. Eventually, the man staggered to his feet and started running back to his pickup. Sawyer and I ran back to the girls, telling them everything. By the time we finished, that Dodge Ram had disappeared into the night. The girls wanted to pack up and take everything back to the car, but there was a part of me that was nervous about that plan. The guy was unstable and now injured. There was no telling what he might do, and I wasn't excited about walking in the darkness with our hands full. Brielle made a good point, though, saying he could come back with a gun, so I told Dakota to call the police and tell them where we were and what had happened. Once the police were on their way, the four of us started walking toward the parking lot with our stuff. Maverick was on high alert, and I have to admit, the only reason I felt even remotely safe was because of him. I noticed lights up ahead, near my car, and felt relieved thinking it was the police. A man in uniform got out of the vehicle to take our statements, and I wasn't ready for what happened next. He quickly pointed out that my car's tires had been slashed, and I was horrified to discover it. The officer drew his weapon and told me to open the car, which I did. He checked the inside and the trunk, but fortunately, there was no one hiding. Only afterward, when we took a closer look at the officer's vehicle, did we notice it wasn't a real police car but a dark car with a magnetic light on the roof. The man helped us call a real officer and a tow truck. While we waited, he told us that in the past few months, there had been several attacks along that strip of beach, all with a similar pattern. A man in a pickup pretending to own the beach, trying to lure isolated campers into the woods. 2 groups of tourists had never been found. Thank God we had brought Maverick with us that night. That guy was probably a serial predator. It could have been a quadruple homicide if he had gotten what he wanted. The authorities never caught the pickup man, and sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, waiting for other unsuspecting campers. Finding a nice secluded spot to spend time is definitely an amazing experience, but now I know it carries risks I had never considered. It was spring break 2011. My friend Brooke and I had carefully planned our escape from Northwestern University's campus to the sun-drenched paradise of Palm Springs, California. After months of intense studying and the long Illinois winter that was finally giving way to spring, we needed sunshine and freedom. We were both 22 and had been saving for months to afford an elegant house with a pool in the Vista Las Palmas neighborhood, about 20 minutes by lift from the city's main attractions. We landed Thursday afternoon. The dry desert heat seemed to instantly melt away the months of academic stress I had accumulated. We spent the first evening simply exploring the neighborhood, stopping at a small outdoor bar where we savored craft cocktails while enjoying the view of the mountains framing the city. It was the perfect beginning. On Friday morning, we decided to visit the Ace Hotel, famous for its pool and vibrant atmosphere. Stretched out on poolside loungers with our towels, Brooke and I attracted the attention of several groups of vacationing guys. We politely brushed them off, but when a man named Garrett approached, or more precisely, approached me, something about him immediately caught my attention. He had a distinctive southern accent, a quiet confidence in his manner, and a polished appearance that betrayed a certain understated wealth. Garrett asked what our plans were for the evening and, after a brief conversation, asked for my number. I gave it to him without hesitation. After he left, Brooke couldn't help but notice how Garrett hadn't stopped to talk to any other group of girls, just checking his phone as he walked away. Brooke was visibly annoyed by the selective interest Garrett had shown in me. Later, tired of the growing crowd at the hotel, we decided to return to our rental house with a few bottles of wine and snacks purchased at a local store. While sipping wine by the pool listening to music, I gave in to the impulse to text Garrett. The response came almost immediately. He and a friend had no plans for the evening and suggested meeting in Vista Las Palmas. Brooke wanted to know if the friend was attractive, but I avoided asking him that. We decided to invite the guys for a drink at our house before going out. Garrett and his friend Wesley arrived around 8, bringing an expensive bottle of tequila that they placed on the kitchen counter. Wesley was surprisingly charming, with a natural elegance that seemed to complement Garrett's more direct attitude. Brooke was pleasantly impressed. We drank on the patio for about an hour. The guys were eloquent, telling stories of travels to exotic places and talking about their jobs in finance in San Diego. Everything seemed perfectly normal, but perhaps too perfect. The group decided to go to a trendy venue nearby. Brooke and I were already quite affected by alcohol when we arrived, and Garrett and Wesley continued to order rounds of shots. My memory began to blur, the outlines of the evening becoming increasingly indistinct. At one point, Brooke and Wesley moved to another area of the venue, leaving me alone with Garrett. When I excused myself to go to the bathroom, Garrett offered to order another round. I asked for a tequila soda. Upon returning from the bathroom, I noticed something disturbing. Garrett was hunched over the drinks at the counter, his body positioned to hide what he was doing. I shifted slightly to get a better view and saw him handling something near my glass. Despite the alcohol in my blood, an alarm rang in my mind. I walked away without him noticing, looking for Brooke in the crowded venue, but my friend seemed to have disappeared along with Wesley. I went out into the street and repeatedly tried to call her, without success. Garrett texted me asking where I'd gone. I ignored it. Instead, I sent numerous messages to Brooke, warning her that I suspected Garrett had tried to drug me and that we needed to get away from those guys immediately. I started walking toward the rental house. Finally, Brooke responded by questioning my accusation, suggesting that the guy was simply checking his phone. I tried to call her, but Brooke only replied with another message, informing me that she was still with Wesley and would join me soon. I returned to the house, entering with the electronic lock code. The door closed automatically after a few seconds, as did the one at the back. Sitting alone, still under the influence of alcohol, I began to doubt my own perception. Maybe I had overreacted and Garrett was really just checking his phone. The silence of the house was interrupted by the sound of the back door handle moving, followed by the noise of the electronic lock keys and the beep of a failed attempt. Then came a message from Brooke, asking me to open the back door. I approached the door and called out to my friend, but received no response. I tried calling her phone, but still nothing. Another message arrived, urging me to hurry and open the door, warning me that someone was coming. Panic began to take hold of me. I shouted through the door, telling Brooke she was scaring me. There were no peepholes or windows that would allow me to see who was outside. I begged for any sign confirming my friend's presence, but the silence from the other side of the door continued. Remembering the peephole in the front door, I ran to check and saw with horror what appeared to be Garrett hidden to the side, partially in shadow. A stream of terrifying thoughts crossed my mind. Was Brooke in danger? Had she been forced to send those messages? Too terrified to open any door, I replied to the message saying I was calling the police. I received no response. I actually called 911, explaining the situation with a trembling voice. While talking to the operator, I checked the peephole again. Garrett was gone. When the police arrived, one of the officers asked if my friend was a girl with auburn hair. I nodded. The officer told me that a colleague had found a young woman in a confused state and was bringing her there. Brooke arrived in a second police car, visibly shaken and in tears. Between sobs, she explained that her phone had been stolen and that she had wandered the streets for almost 2 hours before a passerby helped her contact the police. The messages I had received had not been sent by her. The officers found Brooke's phone thrown into the pool in the backyard. The guys had evidently fled when I mentioned the police. We had to file a detailed report, describing every particular of the evening. The police promised to retrieve surveillance footage from the venue. We had to contact the homeowner to end our stay immediately. We spent the rest of the night in a hotel near the airport, awakened by nightmares every time we closed our eyes. A week later, I received a call from the Palm Springs police. The officer informed me that Garrett's phone number was registered to a man who had reported his cell phone stolen 3 days before our meeting. They were using stolen phones, probably to contact other potential victims. After that call, we received no more updates, despite repeated attempts to get information about the case. The lack of priority given by the police to similar situations, even with concrete evidence, left me with a sense of vulnerability that has never left me. Palm Springs, with all its palm trees and bright sunshine, has become in my mind a place of hidden pitfalls. The thought of how close we came to a potentially tragic fate continues to haunt me, making it impossible to look at spring break with the same sense of freedom as before.